Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. I'm Kilian Englert, and joining me today is Ryan O'Boyle. Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Kilian. Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on again. So we have a pretty cool topic for everyone today. I know that Ryan and I talk about this a lot, and we're in this sort of work from anywhere type of environment. And a lot of us are used to collaborating and working on many different devices. And Ryan and I are always chatting on Teams and sharing files. And at least on the kind of technical side and the marketing side, we're collaborating with people using various different services like Box and G Drive. So it's pretty common and pretty typical anymore. This is just the way that we kind of live and work now. So when we were talking about this, we actually ran across an interesting article not too long ago about an organization during COVID that was doing contact tracing. So they were gathering information about people who may have been exposed and storing that information and collaborating with their teammates. However, the interesting part of this story is that it's possible that they might have been sharing this to anybody on the internet through public sharing links. So of course, these services are great at sharing and collaboration, but I don't think maybe a lot of people know that there's a lot of potential exposure depending on how the links are set up. So Ryan, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about some of the Google Drive specific types of sharing links and why they could be particularly dangerous, I suppose, if misconfigured?
Yeah, definitely. In Google Drive, similar to many of the other collaborative data stores like Box and OneDrive and SharePoint Online, you have the ability to share data out. That's
Right.
kind of the point, like you mentioned. And you have some options about how to do so. First, you can create dedicated sharing links to specific users or
Right.
specific groups that are specified through the configuration. You also have the ability to, have that a little bit broader, where anybody with their link can access that data,
Right.
within certain permissions as well. You have the option to configure just view rights versus modify or comment rights, things like that. And then you have more publicly accessible options where you
Right.
can, do something like create a publicly exposed link, or in some cases also publish a document or a file. And actually, interestingly enough, when you create one of these public links, it actually allows the file to be indexable by Google. So it essentially exposes it to anybody with internet access and
Right.
the ability to get onto Google and search that file. And it sounds like this last option here, which is generally the scariest option, may have been the scenario that this organization may have run into.
Yeah, that's definitely sounds like it from the article. And that, I think, is maybe a surprise to a lot of people as we go about our normal business, is that this is an option to potentially make that indexable link of the data in there. So it's, again, a little bit more than even just the typical outside sharing. There are, as you mentioned, there are other types. Would you mind going into the internal sharing too? Because that's something else I think people might not realize, that as we're collaborating, there are such things as like internal global links as well. What's the difference between like the public one and the internal one?
Sure. So the internal one, you can share it essentially with anybody within the specific domain that you're sharing.
Right.
And you can do that within multiple domains as well, versus the public, which is also including users outside of the organization, essentially anybody on any domain. I think that's the biggest difference there. And the internal public link we're saying, or the internal broad link, not necessarily indexable by those folks outside of the organization. So while still not great practice, a little bit less scary in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And it just kind of goes to show that the collaboration is so pervasive and so easy, and by design it's made to be that simple. But we still need to kind of be a little bit careful. Now, in terms of organizations who are concerned about this type of thing, are there tips or recommendations on how they would find these types of links, or maybe disable those public links if possible?
Yeah, I always recommend organizations try to, set secure configurations within their environment and try to limit the amount of public exposure. If you have a user who wants to share with an external user or a third party, we should really be enforcing that they share that link directly with that user. We're still exposing ourselves to external users at that point, but at least it's somewhat controlled. I think having a regular review of the data that's been shared publicly or externally, as well as combining that with things like data classification and sensitive data scanning, is a great way to start to understand the risk that we're introducing into our organization through the potential collaborative sources like this.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. And of course, we know that users are going to share, and that's the point of it. We just want to make sure that we do it in a way that allows them to be as effective as possible, but do it in a secure way. So that's a great takeaway for the audience. Well, thank you so much for that kind of insight there. I think it's really helpful, and I don't think a lot of people maybe realize those multiple different sharing levels. So definitely something to keep in mind, a great takeaway if you happen to administer these services. So thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. Ryan, thank you for being on. If you liked this content, if you found it valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel. We have a new video out at least once a week, sometimes more. And if you did find it interesting, please consider giving us a like or maybe even leaving a comment. Ryan and I always appreciate those. Well, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Ryan, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks all.